Mike, before you begin, Chris, Les has indicated a willingness to establish an adaptive management work team. Is that something that you'll follow up on?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Mike?
you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the council and the staff for completing the Delta plan. There's something for everyone to dislike and threaten litigation over, so I assume that's progress. The Delta Protection Commission is indeed a partner with the council. The Delta Protection Commission was formed in 1992, and recently we updated our maps to reflect the current zoning that takes place in the Delta. And in applying the definition of urban limit line that's in the Act, we established white lines around the unincorporated communities in the Delta. And those bright lines, I think, help define the jurisdictions of both the council and the commission in the Delta. For those areas that are within the bright lines around the communities, that's considered to be a secondary zone. For those areas outside, it's the primary zone. The Delta Reform Act has required the Commission to do the economic sustainability plan, of which I'd like to acknowledge the incorporation of many aspects of that into the Delta plan. We are also charged with doing a feasibility study for establishing a national heritage area, which is to help define the Delta as an evolving place. Additionally, the Commission is charged in the Reform Act as providing input regarding project proposals in the Delta, and those input is to the Council in terms of the impact of proposed projects on the Delta culture and environment. We are also a portal for environmental projects, and so as such we are indeed partners in terms of implementing the Delta Reform Act. But I think there are some challenges with respect to the Delta plan. And I'd like to make a few comments on that because I think it goes to the credibility of the council and the plan into the Delta. And one of the real challenges is that the council now does not become by default another CalFed, California Bay Delta Authority. An authority that was without authority, that oversaw a group that was fractionalized without a unity of action. And why do I say that? And I would like to go through a list of some of the issues I think that relate to the credibility of the Delta Reform Act as going through the council to the people of the Delta. And remember that the Delta Reform Act also specified that the Commission was also recognized the Commission as being a voice of the Delta. First, there's been discussions about whether or not the BDCP becomes part of the Delta Plan, or as part of the Delta Plan, does the Council have oversight over the implementation of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, particularly with respect to the Delta Reform Act. And I'd recall to the Council that the Delta Reform Act defined the co-equal goals of water reliability and restoration of Delta. But it also stated that it was a policy of the state of California, inherent in the co-equal goals, to protect and enhance the unique cultural, recreational, natural resource, and agricultural values of the Delta as an evolving place. And this was among several other objectives. Recent statements by Jerry Merrill, representing the administration, stated that the BDCP is not designed to save the Delta, and that nothing can save the Delta. This raises a credibility question of, if this is so, are the co-equal goals of water reliability and restoring the Delta going to be ignored? If not, who or what state agency will oversee the BDCP to ensure compliance with the 2009 Reform Act? Second, there are various proposals for habitat restoration that range from acreage of about 8,000 acres to over 100,000 acres. A question, I think, for the Delta residents is, what role does if any, does the Council have in reconciling the difference between these acreage as suggested for habitat restoration, particularly because the difference in the acreages affects the legislative objective of achieving the co-equal goals while protecting and enhancing Delta agriculture. Third, other agencies are proceeding to take actions with respect to the Delta. And within the Department of Water Resources, there's been meetings to develop a policy to mitigate for the loss of farmland with the implementation of the BDCP. Interesting, in those meetings, They do not include Delta stakeholders, nor has the question been presented to Delta farmers of how habitat restoration could be incorporated with ongoing farming operations. There is a sense in those discussions that the discussion is more concerned with taking without compensating rather than trying to mitigate and incorporate restoration of habitat along with protecting and enhancing the agriculture of the Delta. Fourth, responsibility for paying for the improvements for water reliability and mitigation of environmental damages caused by exporting water south of the Delta has been discussed as an obligation of beneficiaries of the water exported from the Delta. Recent discussions have suggested that beneficiary pays will not stand and the public will be called to pick up some of the cost. Now, the principle of beneficiaries' pays has been foundational to the reducing the need for general obligation bonds and general fund money for water projects, both in and outside the Delta. Often there have been discussions at this council about those the responsible should be paying for redressing or getting any of the benefits from the improving of the Delta. Again, the question comes back in terms of credibility, does a council have a role in defining and affecting beneficiary pays? Fifth, it's been suggested that in interpreting, preserving, and enhancing agriculture in the Delta, that preservation of agriculture in the Delta should be limited to that which is unique to the Delta and not common elsewhere. Now, California raises over 200 different crops, some grown nowhere else in the nation. But crops in the Delta, as well as crops in the areas that benefit the Delta exports, are not unique in the world and are commonly imported, as is done seasonally now, from other parts of the world. It's been suggested that not growing crops in the Delta will allow more water to be exported. The converse is equally true, and that is retiring farmland that relies on exported water adds flow to the Delta. Retiring farmland in the Delta is estimated to actually also increase water consumption compared to cultivating Delta farmlands. The Delta people believe that farming in the Delta on reclaimed islands is as unique to California as irrigating deserts. And I think a relevant question that has to be addressed that hasn't talked about intensely is, can we reduce reliance on the Delta by importing more crops and retiring farmland? And then on 6, during my tenure with water issues, and that's been almost 20 years, there have been discussions of no-regret projects. And these projects have been suggested by Water Association, environmental groups, and others. And for the past 18 months, the group has been meeting to develop a consensus list, and the Delta Vision Foundation has also advocated for projects that would ensure water reliability and also begin to restore the Delta. Monies are available from several past bonds, yet there's been no movement on many of these projects. Part of the problem is the local match requirement. Beneficiaries have been approached to partner with local agencies to pursue projects that carry out the co-equal goals, but the common response is that no one wants to participate in promoting a project that might suggest that the BDCP is not needed. This council has discussed this issue. The question comes in, does the council have the authority to move state agencies, contractors, and locals to propose and fund projects that both further water reliability and restoration of the Delta? The Delta Protection Commission is very much concerned about the proposed changes to the Delta. It welcomes the partnerships, I said before, with the Council on overseeing land use in the Delta. But I think the Commission would like to remind people that the people in the Delta have not changed. What has changed is the population around the Delta and the pressures on the Delta by that population. And too often it seems that those who have been good stewards of the land, who have contributed to flood protection of the urban periphery, are the very ones that are being asked to sacrifice for the benefit of others. This perception was true in CalFed, and I think in part led to the demise of CalFed. These are challenges that affect the credibility. And without credibility, we end up with fractionalization and a lack of interest to want to participate. And that could further delay and hamper what has been a topic for this state for going on over 4 decades of trying to restore and protect the Delta and address the water needs of California. I would hope that we could have greater definition of authorities, greater effort of implementation, to be able to bring the diverse groups together to work in trying to address this, and also address it with the principle of not working on the demise of one area for the benefit of the other. And on a personal note, I will be leaving the Commission on June 1st. I want to thank the Chair, the Council, and the staff for the opportunity to work with you over the past 2.5 years. I enjoyed the friendship, the progress we've made on many issues, and it is my hope that the Reform Act is implemented to truly achieve the co-equal goals and the objectives identified by the legislature as inherent in the success of achieving the co-equal goals.
Mike, thanks for your comments. Sorry to see you leaving. I hope you're becoming the ambassador to the Bahamas or something like that, so you can be near water.
Actually, I'm going to be a grandfather.
Yeah, that's a good role. So, Council, any questions of the panelists? Don?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just, Mike, back to your first point. I wanted to make sure I think that I was clear, but as you were talking about the role and the involvement of BDCP, what was the suggestion that you were making in that? Well, I mean, again, if you could just summarize that relative to the values of the Delta, and was it the call to the Stewardship Council to be sure that there is force and effect to saving and preserving the Delta? I just want to be clear on the point. I understand what you were saying, but
well, part of the discussion has been: does the BDC become incorporated in the Delta Plan, or does incorporation in the Delta Plan allow the Council to have oversee over its implementation to ensure compliance with the Delta Reform Act? And in the Delta Reform Act, even in your executive summary, you've expanded from previous writings where you've just focused on water reliability and restoration to now to recognize the objectives inherent in the achieving of those 2 goals, and that is to preserve and enhance agriculture, the culture, and the environment of the Delta. Not an easy task, I'll admit. They are viewed in many ways as being in conflict. But there are advocates of the BDCP that their actions could be interpreted to be contrary to trying to achieve the inherent objectives.
In your review of it, as relates to some of the aspects of BDCP, those that might be either habitat and or construction related in the primary zone of Delta, what's the role of the DPC, at least from your perspective as the ED, and certainly on consult, obviously, with those advisors from a legal perspective and maybe a policy perspective on that? What's your take on that?
Well, in the primary zone, we have the Land Use Resource Management Plan, which is fairly explicit in terms of what land uses are allowed in the primary zone. Our major role is to coordinate with the 5 counties for consistency of the 5 county general plans with the Land Use Resource Management Plan. And we have the authority, if they're not, to say that they're inconsistent, remand them back to the county to bring them back into consistency. There are now some challenges that are being contemplated to the Land Use Resource Management Plan as it affects local jurisdictions of lands that they have in the primary zone. And that is going to be continuing pressure going forward. I think where counties are looking at being limited in terms of what they may be able to do to expand their own economic development and well-being.
Maybe just put a little finer point on it. So if BDCP or aspects of it were in conflict with the Land Use Resource Management Plan, how would that be rectified, at least at the commission level, recognizing the council has a role too.
We have the opportunity, as accorded in the statute, to make a response to the council as to what the potential impact could be, suggest mitigation measures to that, but there's no obligation on part of the council to take that or enforce that, nor does it seem to be in the discussion within the council to have authority over the BDCP and actions that they may want to take forward.
Okay, thanks.